giving you a hard time, dude. That beats the same way I. Yeah, I mean it's a zone change. I mean it's not even a zone change. It's like redesignating. Okay. So, I think you're definitely you are.
Okay, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the City of Victorville Planning Commission meeting for December 13th, 2023. I will call this meeting to order. If we can start with roll call, please.
Commissioner Marsh,
Here.
Commissioner Messon.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Chair Kurth.
Here.
And Commissioner Cook Askins is absent.
Thank you. Next, if you'll please rise for the invocation led to us by Commissioner Thomas, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Marsh.
Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight asking that you continue to bless us. Father, we thank you for allowing us to get through this year. And Father, we look forward to the next year. We ask that you guide us as we go through our deliberations this evening, Father, and help us make the right decisions, Father, for the city, for the citizens. Father, just be with us as we move through this agenda tonight. We ask blessings on everyone here. We ask blessings on the city councilman and this planning commission. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, if everybody would just please face the flag, place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we jump into the agenda items, we will open up for general public comment. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do. Our first speaker is Corey Fisher on a non-agendized item.
Yes, these are for items that are not agendaized outside of those items. This is just general public comment.
Hi,
Welcome.
good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Excuse my etiquette formality here. It's my first time approaching it. So, is there a time limit or?
Yeah, the general speaking time limit is if you could keep it under 3 minutes. That's the limit.
Okay, I just had one question for council. I recently purchased a property out here as an investment property. I'm a developer now in the city of Los Angeles. I've worked on 400 homes in the past 4 years. And my question for council was, is there any reasons to oppose the legislative for AB 1033, which would entitle homeowners to sell in their ADUs as independent properties?
Since this item is not agendized, we can't really go into deep discussion on that. However, it sounds like you have a question regarding development laws within the city. So I'm going to refer you over to one of our staff members that can maybe give you some information or give you the right person to contact at City Hall to help answer that question.
Yes, and Chairman Kruth, if I might, I would like to just add a little bit more insight. This gentleman did reach out to staff, and earlier this afternoon we did respond, but I believe this gentleman is just approaching the commission just to voice his support of future allowances for ADUs to be independently owned.
Is that the case?
I just received a response about 2 hours ago. They told me to come to council and approach with that question.
Okay, is that a question or are you voicing your support on that
For both.
on that policy?
For both.
So if you are voicing your support on the ADU policy that you mentioned, your comment has been made part of the record tonight. And if you have any questions for staff on the details, that would probably be best to be asked directly to staff.
Sure. How do I follow up with that? Is that via email?
Yes, we could continue conversing via email.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no additional speaker cards.
Okay, then with that, I'll close the general public comment portion. And we will move on to agenda item number 1. The recommendation is that the Planning Commission consent to Commissioner Cook Askin Jr.'s absence from the September 2023 through December 2023. Are there any comments from staff on this one?
No, just to recap, as I mentioned at a prior meeting, I believe it was the September August meeting, when you made the recommendation to excuse his absence, prior absences for the last 3 months. We are bringing it back for your consideration. You know, these were unexpected absences for Commissioner Cook Askins, but we do recommend at this point, based on the letter that we sent out to the commission, that that you do allow these absences to occur and then reassess in the new year.
Okay. So just so we're all clear on the commission here, Commissioner Cook Askins has been absent. We did receive a letter, I think that we all saw, that would saying that he hopes to be back with us, to be back participating in the commission at our next meeting, which would be in January. So I'm going to open it up if the commissioners have any thoughts on how this, if they have any. Well, I'll just say that I personally I think we should excuse the absences up through this meeting, seeing that he is reported to be back by the next meeting. And if there's any other comments or any other thoughts from the commission, jump in.
I agree with those comments. So I will move to approve the absences.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Messin, second by Commissioner Thomas. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner Messin,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Chair Kurtz.
Yes,
Motion passes with Vice Chair Cook Askins being absent.
thank you. That moves us on to agenda item number 2, staff report, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, and public. My name is Mina Morgan. I'm the project planner for case number PLAN 23-0002. This is a site plan modification and a conditional use permit modification request to upgrade a construction phasing plan from a initially approved 2-phase plan to a 3-phase plan on a vacant site located at the northwest corner of Hook Boulevard and Amargosa Road. The property is zoned R1, single family residential, and is located within an initiative area. This project was approved a few months ago in September by the Planning Commission to allow for the development of a shopping center to take place in 2 phases. However, shortly after the approval, the applicant informed city staff that the anticipated tenant for parcel number 4, which was Aldi's, has opted to withdraw from the project, and as a result, the end user for parcel number 4 remains undetermined at this time. Now, in order to maintain the momentum of the project, the applicant is requesting to upgrade the previously approved phasing plan from a 2-phase plan to a 3-phase plan. And the proposed phasing consists of a car wash and a Chase Bank for phase number 1, a drive-through restaurant for phase number 2, and approximately 16,710 square feet retail building for phase number 3. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed project, and take the following actions. 1, find that the project previously assessed under the adopted environmental exemption for a shopping center project PLAN 22-00034 and adopt resolution number P-23-031 approving the conditional use permit portion of case number PLAN 23-00032 and adopt resolution number P-23-030 approving site plan portion of case number PLAN 23-0032 subject to the attached condition of approval. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I also have the applicant here. If you have any questions.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions for staff on their report? You're the applicant representative? Yes, we're gonna open up the public hearing in just a moment, and you'll be the first one to come up. You're welcome.
I have just 2. I just want to confirm that parcel 3 is still going to be a drive-through restaurant. And then as far as parcel 4, I know it states that at a future time it'll be developed, but it's also dependent on someone to rent the lease out. So given that this was also approved with the 4 projects, assuming there was going to be 4, how do we know if there's going to eventually be a 4th, maybe in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Like, how long do those conditions at least are they available for?
let me address that. Chairman Kurth and fellow commissioners, the site plan approval is good for 3 years. Following that, as long as they have active building permits and are under construction, the entitlement stays active. So at some point, if they allow there to be no active building permit on the site at some distant future, that could be 5, 6 years down the line, the remaining entitlement would lapse. And then that's, let's say hypothetically parcel 4 did not develop, they would have to come back for a site plan approval in that distant future.
My question is, are they going to move forward with the landscaping even around that vacant lot until it's developed?
Yes, that's gonna be a part of phase 1.
Okay, so it won't be a great big unsightly hole. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I will now open up the public hearing. And I noticed we have the applicant here. You're welcome to come forward.
Hey there, I'm Lauren Smith. I am the project manager for the Mr. Car Wash location that's on the Roy Rogers site. I just had a few questions and would like a little bit of clarification based on the previous conditions of approval for the entitlement previous. Oh yeah. Okay. One of the comments requests that we provide a canopy above our vacuum stalls, which is something that isn't prototypical for us. We typically don't like to do it because it provides shelter and typically allows for camping, or not allows for, but encourages camping, and that's something that we want to avoid. And if that's something that you guys aren't willing to change, we wanted to know a little bit of more details of what you were looking for, like maybe the size of the canopy over the vacuum enclosure. Is it going to be solid? Does it need any opacity? How does it relate to the building as far as colors or materials, or what are you looking for? We just wanted a little bit of clarification on that.
I don't have that condition in front of me, and I'm not so sure that all the design elements are. That would probably be in the code, but maybe staff could speak more to that.
Sure, Chairman Kurth, fellow commissioners. I do recall the history regarding that condition. So yes, the applicant did come in, did not propose having a canopy there. Staff did recommend, and the commission ultimately approved the project with a covered canopy. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Mainly for the aesthetics of it, because this is the same area where the vacuums are. So instead of having like the exposed vacuum pipes, they could be more concealed underneath the canopy. And the canopy also does provide shelter for not transients or anything, but it does provide shelter for the customer. This is highly visible where their vacuums are. They're located along Amargosa Road, along that main front drive aisle. But it is the planning commission's purview. If you feel that a canopy is not necessary, we can look to remove that condition as part of this action.
Was that the only condition that you wanted to address tonight?
No.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead with and open up a few more of the whatever you want to present to us, and I'll discuss that.
Absolutely. Sorry, and just to expound on the canopy situation, so we've noticed that our car washes, they bring in a lot of customers, and typically for the locations that we've previously provided canopies for, it makes the customers want to stay longer, take their time. They have shade from the sun or any elements, and we don't want to create a traffic issue based on people taking a lot longer to clean and vacuum out their cars. So that's another reason that we don't necessarily want to have the canopies. But again, if that is something that you want, we would just want a little bit more information on how you want that to look.
if I might, Chairman Kurth, we have required them to be a solid, like metal type canopy that would architecturally integrate with the building, similar to what you see close to City Hall here at the like a Quick Quack. They have solid canopies.
Okay, so just to be clear, that sounds good, architecturally integrated, but I understand what that means, but it doesn't necessarily give me a direction of the aesthetic necessarily as it compares to like our building. And I do understand that Quick Quack has the canopy, but they also have their own designs and I guess aesthetic and prototype of the building. And I just want to make sure that or at least try to make sure that the design of the canopy you're requesting does actually integrate architecturally. So just as when you say metal, do you mean corrugated metal? You want flat metal? I just want a little bit more of the specs on what you're looking for. So that way when we do design it, we don't have any issues.
So, Chairman Kurth, it's my understanding that this project was brought forward at the request of the applicant. More than just the applicant that you see here. That's part of just the Mr. Car Wash, the overall developer. It's a custom that if we have remaining items that are not resolved as far as like all the details on the plans, we typically add a condition of approval that is sorted out later. That's approved by staff. The condition typically has subject to the review of the zoning administrator. However, if they want to continue this project and then provide those details, or if the commission wants to opt to continue this project and bring it back when they have all the details ironed out, and staff has provided a recommendation of what's acceptable for a canopy, that can be accommodated if the commission agrees. But it sounds like there's more than one applicant right now. I believe that the overall developer has different timing concerns than maybe just Mr. Car Wash. So I believe there's more than one applicant here tonight to speak to you.
And a similar question with the dumpster enclosure, it was a similar comment where you want it to be architecturally integrated with the building, and it's also to have a roof structure. That was the general comment, but it didn't really give too many specifics of what materials are acceptable, what colors are acceptable, and things of that nature. So similarly, we would like a little bit more clarification on that, because when we do make the changes, again, we just want to make sure that they comply with what you guys are looking for. Because architecture is a little bit subjective as far as design. So what I think and what you think may be a little different. So what are your thoughts on that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Webb. This so far on this project, we're just looking at the site plan conditions. We haven't seen the actual development plan of renderings for each of the buildings yet, or have we?
We have, yes. So
with the trash enclosure details and those, would have those been in there?
It depends. If the applicants provided those, we provide those to the commission. If they don't, then we've typically added that condition of approval that they be architecturally integrated. When we say that, it's there's a standard detail for a trash enclosure, but if there's a certain type of, and it's a CMU block enclosure with a metal cover, so we'd look that they match the same type of CMU. So if it's a split face block on the building, we'd look for that similar matching block on the enclosure, same colors, so on and so forth. So it's not to provide, it's not to add ambiguity. It's just that we didn't have the details and the plans before this went before the commission.
Okay, so then in those cases, which we've seen before, a lot of times when people bring their project in, they'll show pretty pictures of every angle, and it makes it a lot easier for the commission and staff to say, hey, that's actually compatible. It looks really nice. Same thing with the trash enclosure. There's usually a little blowout that shows, the design of the trash enclosure, that it fits. If we've not seen those, then I think what you were saying is that, once this is all approved, you can still come back before and figure out, hey, is it corrugated? Should we do some metal wrought iron? design things to match the project itself. So
Okay.
that's what the next process would be. And I would suggest not continuing this because that will slow your project down. And I know there's a bank going on here, a food, and I don't think we need to stop those due to a design of a trash enclosure or something like that.
Okay, understood. And for future, since this is a group phasing plan, let's say that, just example, one project is delayed in construction. Is that going to delay our ability to get a CO and open, since this project is a huge development with various tenants?
Is there a master developer on this doing the offsites and
There is, yeah, so they'd have to comply with the conditions of approval. So based on the prior site plan entitlement, all of the street improvements would need to be in. And then various, like you're seeing here in this site plan, this is all phase one. So prior to get C of O or certificate of occupancy, those improvements minus the hatch area would need to be improved.
Right, and as far as the screening of the ground and wall mounted equipment, when you say screening, does that include landscape? Does that mean you want some kind of decorative enclosure around it? Does it mean it can be painted? And I know these questions seem silly, but we'll go back and redesign everything and take all the time to do that, develop the CDs and the set, and then we submit it, and then something's wrong or it doesn't, something's wrong or it doesn't necessarily comply. I mean, I guess essentially what I'm trying to say is there were a lot of conditions that we were required to adhere to that were a little beyond what we were expecting and what we had prepared. But again, we want everything to be in line in the beginning rather than the end, just to prevent redoing the drawings, the amount of resubmittals that we have. So is it possible to go back to the drawing board and then come back to present what we have designed based on your conditions of approval for review before we move forward? Because honestly, I have maybe about 20 things I want to discuss, but I don't want to.
Your time is up.
Okay, yes. So what do you think is the best
yeah,
way?
I think definitely you need to get in contact whoever your planning contact
Right.
was, or if it's in the development department contact, right? Would that be to start talking some of those details on design items?
Should we continue this then, since there seems to be a lot of
It-
uncertainty?
I have several questions, but my 3 minutes is up, and I don't want to use any more time. But there's a few major things that I wanted to go through, but I don't have enough time for.
So if I might, I could elaborate. If you took action today, there would still be dialogue between the applicant and staff to sort through those final design issues regarding the canopy, regarding the trash enclosure. If you didn't take action tonight, that could give them an opportunity. But I know that the overall development, Sage Invesco, we may want to just allow the other gentleman standing here to present additional information.
Let's do that because in our information it says Mojave Gray 80 LLC is the applicant. I'm going to assume that. Are you with those folks?
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Ralph Teppish. I represent and work for the developer Sage Invesco. And I just wanted to underscore the effort that's been put into this project over the last 18 months and the collaborative support that we got to put in that project that we believe will serve the community well and align itself with the designs and requirements of the city. As well as numerous conditions of approval dealing with off-sites and underground utilities and the like. It's been a bit of a journey, and we thought we were in good shape a few months ago when I stood before you with the all-day use. That changed weeks afterwards and precipitated the reason why we're here again this evening. And prepared to answer some questions. As it relates to the car wash, we've gone through this with the city and with Mr. Car Wash, and there are some conditions in there to need to be, more further defined maybe. But typically what we do in projects like this is to, as I think Scott alluded to, was to work through that process during the construction drawing stage and be more detailed and elaborate as it relates to the type of design, whether it be the crash enclosure or other particular conditions that were brought up. And so if that's acceptable, we would hope to have you rule on the reapproval, hopefully, of this project with a condition that we'll work closely with our tenants, including Chase Bank, Mr. Car Wash, the drive-through use when we do secure that, and control that project and make sure that it's all done in a timely fashion, with the phase one being the Chase Bank and Mr. Car Wash, subject to the improvements that need to be done before we could open. And that's not atypical. That's what we're prepared to do as a developer. And I'm here to answer any other questions, but did want to assure you all that we can work through this process with planning and with building department as it relates to certain concerns that maybe a tenant or two may have, such as was voiced this evening by this young lady.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant's representative?
Thank
you. Okay. I had just one quick one. So you're saying that you have no problem, which is kind of typical to you. Well, first off, Sage Invesco, you're the master developer, and I'm assuming.
Yeah, we're developing the overall.
Is it a ground lease then with these tenants, like for example, the car wash?
Yes, yeah, we're the master developer.
So she had the question of, when can they get started? Well, it's kind of between, I would imagine it's kind of between your contract and your ground lease of providing the outside access. So
yeah,
to kind of trying to answer her question.
That's an internal issue. It's not a city issue. I mean, we coordinate and cooperate and team up as necessary with our tenants to make sure. And there's also lease requirements that we have to meet as far as timelines and so forth. So yes, that concern that was addressed by her, we can handle and take care of it on an internal basis. That's something that we usually present before a city to have that issue kind of heat up. But yeah, we take care of that. That's my particular responsibility, is to make sure everything comes together. So when we get a C of O, things work out, we open up, live happy ever after.
Right. And I just kind of asked that to tie it in with Ms. Smith, because that was your question. So that will be handled between your internal agreement.
Work with her and Mr. Car Wash and others, as we do with their architects, our architects, their engineers, our engineers. It's, back of the house kind of stuff that we do all day long that's done internally. And the controlling factor is the conditions of approval that we have to meet. And if there's some gray area, we typically go back and forth to clarify that and define that and do details and so forth that become acceptable, and then move forward accordingly.
Yeah, and a lot of that gray area sometimes I've seen is the architectural details where you come together and say, this looks nice. Yes, okay. Let's
not speaking out of turn, right, Scott? That's different.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you can if it's a short one.
Thank you. I know I only had the opportunity to talk about architectural design aspects, but I did have more items I wanted to talk about. I'm honestly a little nervous to agree to everything, especially since we haven't had time to discuss, because right now we'd be agreeing to not really having the answers to all the questions that I have, and that will affect not only design but timeline, and the changes that are requested I'll have to go back and get approval for. I just want to make sure I'm not approving or agreeing to something that Mr. Car Wash, when I speak to my leadership back at my job, that they don't agree with. So just wanted to, I guess, make sure that, or see if we could possibly just have a little bit more time to go back to the drawing board and represent to you guys, or what works for you.
I think normally when say you're the developer, you get your conditions. It's just your project and your land.
Right.
Normally they would the representative would jump on the phone or meet with the city and say, hey, I have a problem with some of these conditions. Can we work on this?
Right.
Doing that, the night of the meeting. That happens sometimes. And if you were to ask for a continuance, usually that happens. In this case, it's different. We've got a developer who's controlling your lease, and it also needs to meet timelines for a bank and a restaurant. And so I think, not speaking for the whole commission, but for me, it'd be very tough to, and we just heard from your master developer saying that would not be a good thing. I have timelines. So I don't think we're going to be able to halt this for you to go back, for your team to go back and take a look at conditions and try to negotiate that. However, once and if this is approved tonight, this project is approved with all the conditions that are in the resolution, all the conditions you read. After the fact, Mr. Webb, if there was an issue, we already talked about design standards, but if there's any other minor issues, can that be looked at on a staff level as long as it's not major and doesn't have to come back to the commission? And if it was something major, would or could that come back to the commission, even though this is a Sage Co-investment applicant?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Kurth. So if the commission did take action today, that would set a new time frame of 3-year approval. During that time, they could start all of their plan check review. We could sort out these minor issues. If we don't come to an agreement at staff level, there's always the ability for the applicant to bring that forward to the commission for consideration. So it would kind of serve both folks. Now, if you were to deny, their canopy design or deny their trash enclosure design, their original site plan that you did approve would still hold as approved. So, yeah, I could see this being worked out during the plan check process if the commission decides to act in approval for tonight.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any other speaker cards?
There are no speaker cards.
Okay. If there's no one else here to speak to us on item number 2, I will. Oh, there is somebody. If you could state your name and address information for the record.
Yeah, my name is Gregory Dan. Live at 12244 Stonegate Drive in Victorville. Just coming up as a proponent of the project. I think it's a great idea for the community. I like the smaller commercial units instead of the Aldi. I think that'll give local small businesses an opportunity to have a new place in a booming development with bank, car wash, fast food, for an opportunity for customers. So just want to come up and give my support for the project.
Thank you. Your comments made part of the record. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on number 2? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will bring it back to the commission for a determination.
I'm gonna go ahead. I'll motion to adopt agenda item number 2 with staff recommendations, including 1, 2, and 3 for approval.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Marsh, a second by Commissioner Thomas. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner Messon,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Chair Kerr.
Yes.
Motion passes with Vice Chair Cook Askins being absent.
Thank you. All right, next we'll move on to agenda item number 3, please.
Thank you, Chairman Kerr. Fellow commissioners, item number 3 is case PLAN 23-00024. Is a public scoping meeting for the preparation of a draft environmental impact report to allow for the development of 3 warehouse distribution buildings totaling approximately 1.35 million square feet on 81 acres on 3 undeveloped properties zoned M1 light industrial and C2 general commercial. This is located on the northwest corner of Topaz Road and Mojave Drive. Today, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission conduct a public scoping meeting to receive a project overview presentation. That presentation will be led by Senior Project Manager from DUDEC, Ronell Candia, and 2, to take public input, and 3, provide the Commission's own comments regarding the potential environmental impacts or concerns. Prior to this meeting, staff did notice the project. We sent out a notice of preparation on November 17th to notify and solicit comments and suggestions regarding the preparation of this draft environmental impact report. And so in that notice, we did also notice this public scoping meeting for the public to find out more information. And with that, I'll give it back to the Commission to bring up the representative from DUDEC.
Yes, let's go ahead and come on up, and we're prepared for your presentation.
Hi, good evening, Commissioner.
Evening.
Loud. Try not to like everyone out here. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, All right, so a brief overview of the agenda. We'll go over the purpose of the scoping meeting, a bit about the proposed project and the environmental document, and then the comment. So my name is Ronell Candia, and I'm here on behalf of DUDEC, the environmental consultant preparing the environmental documents and study. DUDEC is working under the guidance of the City of Victorville, who is the lead agency for the Mojave Industrial Park project, which is proposed by Mojave 80 Gray LLC, the project applicant. Okay. The main purpose of the scoping meeting is to provide information on the proposed project, outline the overall CEQA process this project will follow, and receive scoping comments on the environmental issues that should be further analyzed in the environmental document under CEQA. The California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, which was adopted in 1970, emphasizes public participation and requires publicized environmental information and disclosure. A lead agency is required to conduct a scoping meeting when they have determined an environmental impact report would be required for a proposed project. The purpose of the scoping meeting is to discuss the scope and content of the environmental impact report. This meeting is not a hearing and no decisions will be made regarding the project. Rather, the purpose of the meeting is to facilitate comments from the agencies and interested parties as to what information should be studied and included in the environmental document. Scoping comments can be provided either orally or in writing to the city for consideration in the environmental impact report. Okay, staff has already gone through the project location, so I won't go back to that. Okay, the existing project site is comprised of 81.1 acres of vacant undeveloped land. It is currently zoned general commercial and light industrial transitional. The project proposes the construction and operation of 3 industrial warehouse buildings totaling approximately 1.35 million square feet. The site plan has been rotated for this presentation, so the northern direction on the left and Mojave Drive is on the right. So you can see the 3 buildings. Buildings 1 and 2 are the smaller and building 3 is the larger. The project also proposes street and roadway improvements and construction of utility and stormwater infrastructure. As previously noted, the site has a land use and zoning of light industrial transitional and general commercial. So the proposed project would require that little 19.6 acre pink portion to be rezoned to light industrial. The discretionary approvals required for the project would be the site rezone, approval of the site plan for construction and operation of the industrial warehouse facility and the associated infrastructure and roadway improvements, a deviation request to allow the height of building 3, which is the largest building, to be 53 feet instead of 50 feet high, and also construct a 10-foot high screening fence. The project would require the certification of the EIR, adoption of appropriate CEQA findings, and the mitigation measure monitoring report. So now that you know a little bit about the project, I'll move on to discuss more about the purpose of CEQA and the process being followed for this project. CEQA informs decision makers and the public of the project's potential environmental effects and describes ways in which feasible mitigation or alternatives will be incorporated to avoid or reduce impacts. The purpose of CEQA is also to increase public understanding of the project and the ability to participate in the environmental review process. This is a very simple flowchart showing the overall EIR process. An EIR is the highest level of environmental review required under CEQA and what will be completed for this project. You can see that we're in the very beginning phases of this long process. Once the scoping process is complete, DUDEC will incorporate any information received during scoping into the draft EIR. The draft EIR will circulate for a 45-day public review period. Any comments received on the EIR will be responded to and provided in the final EIR, which will be sent to all commenting agencies and interested parties. The project will then go before the Planning Commission before a final decision is made by City Council and a notice of a determination is filed with the County Clerk and the State Clearing House. So this is a list of all environmental issues that will be addressed in the EIR. So everything from aesthetics to air quality to transportation and noise. So the scoping process, a notice of preparation or an NOP was issued on November 17th, 2023 and identified the issue areas that will be focused on in the EIR. That was the previous slide, or all those environmental issue areas. The NOP circulates for public review and comment until Monday, December 18th, 2023. And again, comments can be received either orally or in writing. And then anyone providing comments is asked to sign in. And all written comments must be submitted to the City of Victorville Planning Department by 5 p.m. on December 18th, 2023. That was my conclusion, my presentation.
Thank you. Okay, then with that, I'm going to open up the public hearing, and I want to see if there is anyone here that wants to give public input on this scoping meeting. Do we have any cards?
We do not.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak to us on item number 3? Okay, seeing no one, then I will close the public hearing, public comment portion of the meeting. And I want to see if there's any feedback or comments regarding potential environmental issues from the commission.
I know transportation is noted on there. I just think that traffic is something that should be focused on, just because Mojave and 395 are major arteries, and there's gonna be a lot of traffic there. Thank you.
Is Cactus a paved road?
Thank you, Chairman Griff, fellow commissioners. Cactus is only partially paved just at the intersection at 395. There was a project to the west of this development that was approved by the commission, another 1 million square foot warehouse that was conditioned to pave that road, Cactus out to 395. But it's not currently paved.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, then that concludes the scoping meeting public comment for the NOP. That's all we need, right? Okay. Then I'll move on to and thank you for coming here for that presentation. Thank you. I'll move on to agenda item number 4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Agenda item number 4 is case number PLAN 23-00012. It is an amendment to the Victorville Municipal Code with an environmental exemption, making various changes to Title 16, including but not limited to, providing updated regulations, requirements, and standards for sidewalk vendors, solicitors, and other mobile vendors and businesses, revising business license processes, procedures, and requirements, and adding and modifying certain definitions. This proposed amendment takes place within the Development Code, specifically Chapter 1 titled Development Department and Chapter 7 titled Business License, and this will establish local licensing requirements and regulations with respect to sidewalk vendors and mobile vehicle vendors who operate within the public right-of-way. This proposal is located within Title 16, otherwise known as the Development Code. That's why it's subject to the review of the Planning Commission in this instance. George Duran, our city code enforcement official, Kevin Spalding with our city attorney's office, Freddie Bonilla, our city engineer, and Joe Slegers, our city building official, have prepared a PowerPoint to go over the specifics of this development. Additionally, there is a revised memorandum prepared and presented to the Planning Commission. This revised memorandum notes an updated resolution, and that updated resolution includes clarified proposed definition of food truck, a clarified proposed definition of residential, updated allowable sidewalk vendor and mobile vehicle vendor operating times, as well as other non-substantive adjustments to the organization and references within the proposed amendment. And within that late edition memo, all those adjustments are highlighted in red text. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed code amendments, and take the following actions. Find the project categorically exempt per CEQA guidelines section 15061B3 and adopt resolution number P-23-029 as proposed in its revised form, recommending City Council approval, Municipal Code Amendment case number PLAN 23-00012. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Duran to present his presentation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, esteemed planning commissioners. Before you is a short presentation outlining our sidewalk vendor ordinance, draft ordinance, guided and by a section in our legal framework that will be covered by our city attorney's office, a section on the outline of how we achieve some of the draft regulations, guided by our city engineer, Mr. Freddie Bonilla, a section in licensing that'll be covered by our building official, Joe Slegers, who oversees licensing, and the regulation component of that as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kevin Spalding.
Mr. Spalding's via Zoom.
Good evening, Chair Kurth and honorable members of the commission. So in 2018, Governor Brown signed into law SB 946, which took effect in 2019. The purpose of SB 946 was to create the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act, and it was a way to reduce local control over sidewalk vending of either food or merchandise within the city limits, or county limits as it were. And typical of those laws where we see reduction in local control, the state starts citing language such as directly related to objective health, safety, and welfare concerns, and subjective standards are eliminated. And the same is true with respect to SB 946. In essence, what SB 946 says is that you may not reduce the total number of sidewalk vendors allowed in any given community, and you may only restrict in sensitive locations pursuant to objective health, safety, and welfare concerns. which then leads city staff to craft an ordinance that allows for the consideration of various objective health, safety, and welfare concerns in order to formulate a broad, comprehensive plan for where such restrictions would be. In addition, what SB 946 does is it reduces the criminal penalties available or eliminates the criminal penalties available for violations of any sidewalk vendor ordinances. Instead, all penalties should be administrative, and they are enforced in a graduated fashion, such as $100 for a first violation, $200 for a second, and I believe it's $300 for a third. These are all subject to ability to pay determinations provided by state law. And once a sidewalk vendor who has been cited under the administrative code succeeds in gaining his or her license, any administrative fines must be reduced to much lower numbers because gaining compliance is the key. In any event, can we go to the next slide, please? In response to SB 946 removing certain local controls and eliminating the criminal penalties as an option, the state of California adopted SB 972. The reason for this is that many local communities had discovered that they could use the California Retail Food Code to go after sidewalk vendors who were in violation of that code and still be able to bring misdemeanor penalties or infractions in order to enforce the law. SB 972 is an effort to further decriminalize sidewalk vending by the state, and it added a chapter to the Commercial Retail Food Code for compact mobile food operations and exempted them from numerous of the provisions, including those provisions that allowed for criminal violations. So SB 972 was the state legislature's intent to make very clear that criminal enforcement against sidewalk vendors is prohibited, and it set maximum penalties for administrative citations only. With that, I will yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Spalding. So before you, as we started developing the ordinance, again, incorporating aspects from our engineering team to identify objective health and safety concerns and crafting viable regulations aiming to support the sidewalk vending. We also tasked ourselves with identifying locations that would be viable and meet the stated regulations outlined in the draft. Before you is just a list of a sample of locations that, based on our draft ordinance, meet the possibility to allow for sidewalk vending. It mitigates any traffic issues, mitigates any pedestrian issues. So in essence, it allows applicants perhaps that may come into the city for a licensing counter and inquire as to what locations they can go. At least it's a good starting point. This is not all inclusive, of course. There are other locations that could certainly be assessed, subject to staff going out there and making sure that the areas that they're inquiring for adhere to our regulations. And next slide, we'll have the engineer.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. So some of the items that we looked at as far as what would be a safe versus unsafe sidewalk vending location is first and foremost accessibility. We want to make sure that those locations where a vendor could operate, patrons that are walking, that are near there, have accessibility. So that would eliminate any underdeveloped streets where we don't have sidewalk. Additionally, we also looked at stop and sight distance issues, concerns with vehicles coming in and out of driveways. So we've limited to anywhere within 150 feet of the intersections. Utilities. So if there's a fire hydrant at a place, our fire department would need to be able to respond in the event of an emergency. So we don't want to block those types of utilities. And last but not least, we want to target sites that parking is already available. An example of a potential safety condition would be like Palmdale Road, where we don't have parking available and somebody just stops and to pull over for any type of vending activity that could create a traffic collision. Next slide, please. So having gone through those regulations, we put together a map of areas that are already pre-screened, where sidewalk vendors could potentially come to City Hall and get a over-the-counter type permit. We've already vetted these locations. We don't have any concerns with schools or stopping site distance or parking is allowed. And in the future, let's say a vendor comes and we look at a site, we could potentially add to this, but these are just pre-approved locations. In addition, we also looked at some locations where it's not feasible. We've provided a list here. Some of the questions are, when it comes to the sidewalk width, inadequate sidewalk width, inadequate parking. And so we've already pre-screened these locations as not feasible because of the safety hazards that I've already discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Bonilla, and we'll have our building official come up to talk to us about the licensing process.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. These next two slides are intended to give you an idea of what the licensing process will be like upon adoption of regulations. So the first discusses kind of the application process. It's essentially the same site. It is exactly the same site. What we call CSS for short is our citizen self-service service portal. Is the same place you go to apply for permits, entitlements, things like that ultimately appear before you as well. So same location there through the city's online portal. The second requirement there kind of discusses two options that Mr. Bonilla alluded to earlier. You kind of have two options. We'll issue you a license, and these licenses are good for a year, by the way. We will issue a license to you that basically allows you to operate at any pre-vetted location in the city for the duration of that year. The second option is to apply for a location that has not, that will obviously carry your higher fee, mainly because it will require staff time to vet that location to see if it meets the criteria that Mr. Bonilla. As far as the vendor list, you're essentially just applying for yourself as a vendor, and then if you have anybody else that's associated with your business that will also be doing the vending, they would be named in this form as well. We are proposing to require live scans of all of our vendors, and just decided that that would be the best means of assuring, the safest possible environment for the citizens of Victorville. They are required to submit a site plan, what we're calling a vendor display site plan that kind of lays out where they're going to be located so that we can make sure of things like not blocking ADA access along the sidewalk, make sure that their equipment fits in the location that they selected, like that. And then business insurance, ultimately also naming the city of Victorville as an additionally insured party. So that first slide is requirements of all applicants. This second slide is requirements of some applicants depending on kind of the conditions of their application. So for instance, this first requirement, the fictitious business name statement is obviously only required if the owner is not using their surname in their business name. So if I'm ultimately Slager's Burgers, for instance, I don't have to go through that process, but if I'm World's Best Burgers, for instance, I have to go through the process to provide a copy. The seller's permit is going to essentially be required of anybody who's selling tangible property, whether that's shirts, food items, things like that. So the vast majority of applicants will have to provide that as well. health permit is obviously only applicable for food vendors. You have to require them to go through their process and hopefully obtain approval from the health department as well. The vehicle list has to be provided as well to make sure that, you know, we're using an approved and registered vehicle ultimately for the sales. And they have to provide proof of the registration and insurance for that vehicle as well. Would be the last requirement regarding vendors actually using it. So that kind of covers the gamut of the application requirements. Really, it's not vastly different than our process now. And again, to reiterate, once these are all provided, that will result in an approval that allows them to operate for a full year, and then we'll process a renewal once that year is up. With that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Duran.
Thank you, Joe. So that takes us to our regulatory side. And as Mr. Spalding kind of laid out, a lot of these regulations are laid out and guided through SB 946 and SB 972. But it's our intent to once this ordinance is, if in fact adopted, regulate the location, ensuring that they're complying to their site plan, they're complying to the distance regulations to fire hydrants, to drive approaches to private property, distances to schools, distances to parks. There's additional regulations mentioned in there regarding operation in parks, where a city does have a signed concession agreement, not to impact those arrangements. A safe distance from certified farmers markets as well. There's a variety of different distance requirements that the Code Compliance Department would end up either regulating on a complaint basis or at the initial onset of a licensing to ensure that they're set up correctly. There's a few things that the law does not allow us to consider. That would be undue economic competition. In other words, it's okay for vendors to vend the same thing at the same location, so long as they are compliant to our regulations. So the law does prohibit a city from employing regulations that address those types of concerns. There are statutes listed in SB 946 that also govern the issuance of fines for vendors that are in fact licensed but don't adhere to the regulations. $100, $200, $500 are fines, plus in addition to the rescission of the license, at the fourth offense, should they continue to disregard our requests. And the fines range from $250 to $500 for unlicensed locations, for unlicensed vendors. Again, the distinction is that sidewalk vendors cannot be cited criminally. That does not apply to mobile food truck vendors, which is also addressed in a different section as well. And also wanted to clarify a few kind of distinctions on vending. There are roaming vendors and stationary vendors. Stationary vendors are those that operate primarily, as we covered here, on a fixed location and adhere to certain distance requirements from certain features that we talked about. But the roaming vendors have the ability to roam in residential areas, are limited to time, but unlike stationary vendors, roaming vendors again can operate in residential areas. The stationary vendors cannot set up in areas that are exclusively all in residential areas. And the fines and so forth are equally the same laid out for roaming vendors. And with that, we're into any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you for those presentations. I'll start to my left, Commissioner Messon.
Sure, I have a few. Thank you. So I know you mentioned that the fines are slightly different if they're licensed and unlicensed, but I believe you said that if they become licensed, they get cut by 80%, correct? How are they going to be notified if this passes tonight? Are they just gonna receive their first violation and get the $100 fine, or is there gonna be a grace period? How are we gonna notify vendors?
We don't intend to do that. You know, we have vendors right now that, be candid with you, is it's hard to identify them. They don't have an ID, so it's difficult to identify who that is. But certainly, our objective is that if the ordinance is passed, it would employ an initial request and an educational approach, of course. We want our street vendors to be licensed, and there's certainly a pathway forward to that.
And then are the fines established by SB 946, or are they generic as this is what you can choose between? The city can make that decision.
They're guided by the Senate bill.
And then, street signs are mentioned as a distraction. So are they allowed to have a sign that says selling X, or they cannot have that as well?
They're allowed to have some signage. There's guidance about the size of the sign. I think it's 3 square feet for every 1 linear foot of their display.
And do we know roughly how much all the applications that they're going to be putting in, like how much a life scan would cost, how much the permit would cost? Do we know roughly what that would cost if someone was applying for something like that?
The application fees are already stated. I can tell you exactly. I want to say they're maybe $100. But in addition to that, there are some requirements for insurance as well.
So we currently have a different fee structure than what we're looking to set up. Based on the adoption of this, we're already looking to a revised fee study with our current consultant, NBS, to accommodate some of the types that are proposed by the new ordinance. But currently we have a process that I don't know the exact amount. It's in the neighborhood of 200 and change, I believe, for vendors that want to be able to operate throughout the city. But we have a reduced fee for those that operate specifically at special events or city events. It's in the neighborhood just over $80 for that specific.
Thank you. And then just one last one. I know you mentioned a roaming vendor. So for instance, an ice cream truck that's moving around, are they then allowed in residential, or because they're roaming? How does that work?
Yeah, certainly they're allowed in residential areas. There's provisions in the regulations to ensure that they're not just stopping for a long time and vending perhaps in your school. We commonly get concerns from schools about the distraction that causes to students. But yeah, they are allowed to roam in residential areas.
That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Marshall.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. Going back to the placing of signage, so they cannot place their signs, they cannot connect their signs to existing city signs, like stop signs and things like that. It has to be a freestanding sign.
Correct. It has to be a freestanding sign that's incorporated into their cart within a certain size. Also can have a few other distracting elements like lights and so forth.
Okay. And then the other thing, I mean, with the city of Victorville, we have a lot of we have all these county pockets. Is there any collaboration between the city and the county that's going to help with enforcement? Because these vendors, I mean, they're smart. They look at maps and they go straight to the county areas, and then the city says, well, we can't do anything about that. So is there any collaboration between the two?
Yes, there's ongoing collaboration with the county. Our county partners they do a pretty good job of letting us know when they're going to cycle through the area. And when they do, I've seen it's been pretty impactful, and I agree. That's come and go. I agree that some of those vendors obviously understand our geography and limitations for the city.
Right. And then as far as the roaming vendors, now, I mean, to me, it's a nuisance. These people that are pushing these carts, I don't know, they're selling corn, they're selling potato bags of chips, but they're going through neighborhoods, and some of them have these clown horns that they honk all the way up and down the street. Some have a bell that they ring all up and down the street. That's a roaming vendor that's allowed in neighborhoods?
Well, exactly to we described, likely not, because even to what you described, it would have to achieve county health department approvals to vend, prepared food, just like that. It could be prepackaged food that probably comes from a commissary. As far in respects to the food, In respects to the attention that they get, we didn't touch on the regulations of that, short of just being guided by our noise ordinance that regulates the decibel.
Okay.
But they certainly can't also employ loudspeakers and so forth, but some of the measures that you described are not explicitly addressed.
Okay. And then as far as enforcement, I mean, there's really no guarantee. I mean, if you have a vendor that's coming from out of this down the hill or out of the city, and they're up here, and let's just say they're out of compliance, they get a fine. There's really no guarantee that that they're going to pay that fine, and we have really no way of really enforcing the guarantee that they're going to pay it, right?
Yes and no. The fines, if are intercepted, if not paid by the franchise tax board through our fine service, our citation service. But it depends as to the ability for that process to collect against that individual.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Just a couple questions here. One thing is I'm looking at this illustration here, and there are not a whole lot of sites here in the city yet. So I guess we're expecting that to increase after these regulations are passed. But what I'm curious about is crime around those vendors. Are we seeing much crime being committed? Robberies and stuff like that?
We've heard of a few and have had a few. I'm sure we've probably seen in the media, but nothing that draws a distinct, direct concern of something so constant.
I was also looking at the sidewalk specifications, and they have to be so wide, but are the vendors, like in this illustration here with the trailer, are they allowed to turn that around and use the sidewalk to sell on? In other words, block the sidewalk?
They're certainly allowed to position their cart so long as it doesn't impede into the ADA restrictions as we laid out. And of course, that's definitely something we considered, which is a reason why we asked for the details of their display, ensuring that we're not licensing something that's so large or wide. But yeah, we certainly consider that.
Thank you.
A couple comments. Commissioner Messon brought up a good point about notifying, existing vendors out there. But I thought I read in the report here, and you'd be the best one for this question. It said that out of all the street vendors in the city, 2 are licensed. Is that true?
That's correct.
Right now, the only 2 out of everything we see are legal and have license.
That's correct.
Okay. And so we'd only have to notify 2. So, that's all we could do because we don't know their information. And then that brings me to the acceptable stationary locations, the chart that we were given. Are these a sample of acceptable, or are these the only place as of right now that stationary street vending could happen?
This is a sample, of course, and we also considered their interest as to where we commonly find folks that are vending, probably near adjacent busy areas and intersections, and considered those interests into identifying areas that may be viable as well, both to mitigate any hazards and viable for them as well.
Wouldn't it be hard to find any other than these, though, that weren't a commercial street that somebody, because I see everyone pulls over the side of the street, or sometimes in a parking lot, that would kind of block that side. And it has to have 10-foot sidewalks and a few other things. That's kind of hard to find. When you guys made this chart, was it kind of hard to find these, or is there a lot of these?
It took us some effort to ensure that, one, we considered the various regulations that are stated in the code, and equally balancing ensuring that it was some in an area that is going to be of some economic interest to vendors. Again, we're guided by the Senate bill that, one, requires the city to allow for this, and so it's a balance between ensuring we craft ordinances that mitigate our hazards, yet also adhere to the intent of that Senate bill.
Yeah, because we can't block a sidewalk. We know that. We can't block a lane in the street. We know that. So that makes it hard on the city's commercial streets. The I looking at this chart, the St. Andrews Drive, I think that's residential, isn't it? Across on one side of the street, because I think I read that it would only be on commercial and not affecting residences. I think they're like apartments or condos.
Yeah, there's some areas on St. Andrews that head towards
They're on the golf course side. Not that we have to do anything about that now, but I just want to be aware that it made, I think it's important to keep it commercial
Yes.
and so that the residences don't have to stare out at, vendors and a retail feel, basically. It might have mentioned in here, I missed it, but I did think I read that part of the licensing would give like a sticker, which would almost be like a little license plate or a registration stamp, so it could be viewed from a distance. Is that part of the plan?
That's definitely part of the plan. It makes regulation and enforcement much easier, visible. So we're working with our licensing staff to develop a solid program that allows either for a decal, color based.
Okay. And then the only other thing I had was knowing that a majority, a vast majority are not licensed. They won't do that currently. So I don't know if I have a lot of faith that everybody's going to run in and say yeehaw and start ponying up. I don't know. I hope so, but that brings it to the ugly part. We've talked a little bit about the fining. I was a little confused when they talk about the fine structures, but then there's an ability to pay. So what does that mean? How does that work?
Meaning that upon achieving licensure, person who's willing to adhere to the regulations, we have a requirement to reduce their fines of up to 80%, or offer them an ability to pay basically a hardship waiver, where essentially it doesn't necessarily expunge the entire fine, but at least it gives us a nexus to reduce that by 80%.
Who makes that determination?
It's going to be us.
So it's the people that work in the city that look at that. So they must have some kind of a scale or criteria to say you make X amount of money, or your tax return shows this, or they have to try to figure it out somehow to give a discount.
Yes, and matter of fact, courts kind of use that same scale based on a particular formula that commissioners and judges use to equally achieve a reduction for it.
Okay. All right, as long as there's a formula for that. Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions right now from the commission, then I'll.
So this is something the city is required to do, right? By the state, we have to do it.
Yes,
So we're just trying to figure out how to do it. So we can't say no. Okay.
I had just one more. Prepackaged. What does prepackaged mean? Is it like in the store, plastic wrapped, cardboard underneath, or what would you consider prepackaged?
Prepackaged meaning that it came from a bona fide food manufacturer, vendor, usually a commissary if it's going to be like an ice cream truck.
Thank you.
And that means it already kind of met the health standards when it came from the packaging factory, and now it's already been approved. It's just being sold now.
Correct. So the oversight there would likely be the FDA, who regulates food.
Okay. On the you brought up a good point on the street vendors, the guys with the carts that they're allowed in residential. Is there any way that we could work on that, or is that our hands tied on that as well? For residential mobile push carts, I had talked to some neighbors, and they feel the same as what you said in my neighborhood with the bells and the honking, and now they're using whistles and those. And there's the nurse next door. She's like, I work nights. I don't. Why do they got to do this?
Well, they are limited in time, but I believe, Ms. Taguchi, if you can help me with this, but I believe Senate Bill 946 does distinguish and explicitly allow them to be in residential area.
Am I on? I am. I'm not. All right. I'm loud anyway, so. What SB 946 does is you have to permit those types of vendors in residential areas, but you are permitted to regulate that in some way. So, you know, obviously, if you don't want it to be 24/7. So, at present in this ordinance, I think we have staff determined that setting the hours to be commensurate with our noise ordinance. Whether or not we need something different in residential areas is something to maybe more collapsed hours and depending on. I could have sworn there was something in there about horns and bells.
There is something about using loudspeakers and a few other apparatuses. The challenge that SB 946 imposes and highlights over and over is they have to be objective health, safety, and welfare findings. So we certainly can make the argument, but the challenge is how do these regulations mitigate? You know, how do these regulations relate to that? Certainly, reducing the hours could help. That's something that could be proposed. Certainly, eliminating no apparatuses that emit noise could certainly be explored. Again, the issue is how do we connect that to objective health, safety, and welfare?
Neighborhood people trying to sleep. That's welfare to me.
So in essence, we're looking at that this I guess this endeavor, or for lack of better words, it could spread throughout the whole city because right now there's no really. You're looking at targeted areas, but if a vendor wants to set up shop in a non-specified area, they just have to get the city to say that area is compliant, and then they can set up shop there, right? So it could be throughout the city instead of just in certain areas of or specific to certain areas of the city.
Yeah, so long as they conform to the regulations that we laid out, which are extensive. You know, there's distance requirements to an intersection. There's
sidewalk width,
ADA issues, of course. Not all of our sidewalks are built the same size. There's distance requirements from schools. There's timing, also time requirements as limitations as well for stationary vendors. We again we wanted to craft we needed to craft an ordinance that allows for that commerce to occur, yet also mitigates the impacts that may come about from that.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'll open up the public hearing. So at this time, I'll open up the public hearing and to see if we have any speakers tonight. Do we have any speaker cards?
I do not have any speaker cards.
Are there anyone here that would like to speak to us tonight on this item? Welcome. Can we have your name and address to identify yourself, please?
Well, my name is Marcos Vargas. I'm in Sunny Point Street by Mojave. So I'm a resident here and take this out.
And just to remind you, we looking forward to your presentation, and it's a 3-minute time limit for the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Is it going?
Do you want to try this one?
Testing. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you guys for letting me talk. I'm from Temecula. I'm also was a resident of Corona, and this topic here really concerns me as a recent resident of Victorville. I think it's a good idea for the most part. I agree with the terms that George has for these vendors, and for the most part, I do agree with them. But there's some things that just don't make sense to me. For example, why are we wasting our resources on this? There's way more important stuff happening on in this city that's concerning to me as a resident. The homelessness, what are we doing about that? These events, I heard Mr. Bill Thompson, the safety of these events. I go to most of these events. I attend them. They're safe, something to do for my family. There's nothing to do out here. It's boring. It's a boring city. You know, I only came here because the houses are cheap. Mr. George, what are we doing about the homelessness around these vendor events?
Sir, if you could address the commission,
Oh, sorry,
please.
Mr. Rob.
And we're accepting your comments, so just let us know what you think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, my worry is the homelessness around these cities. These events don't really cause any concern for my family's safety as the homeless do. The homeless walk in our streets, the homeless in our shopping centers. That's what concerns me. I don't think we should be wasting the city's resources on stuff like this. Again, just how we're taking care of our city. It's a disaster. Our weeds, my neighbor's weeds, disaster. Call the city, no one comes. No one cares. No one's doing anything. Why is that? The noise complaint, Mr. Paul. You live in a completely different Victorville than I do. I'll tell you that. I'm hearing my neighbors blast their music. I'm hearing exhaust all up and down my street. I'm hearing motorcycles going, I don't know, 160 down Mojave Drive. What are we doing about that? That's what concerns me. Those are the noises I'm complaining about. You know? Are you gonna be complaining about your gardener cutting your grass? No. So why are we complaining about vendors just going up around your street? And what are we gonna do with this fine money that we're finding these vendors? Is it gonna go towards bettering our city? Because from the cities where I come from, they don't have these problems. They're not really worried about petty stuff like this. You know? I want the Victorville that I want for my family is a safe Victorville. No homeless. People not complaining about petty noise.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, seeing no one else, then I will close the public hearing, and I'll bring it back to the commission for any.
Have another speaker.
Oh, okay. I'll open the public hearing again. Welcome.
My name is Miriam. I'm just gonna
You can step up a little bit, and if you could give your name and address just for the record, since we didn't fill out a card.
So, good evening. My name is Miriam, and I'll just be translating. So, good evening. My name is. I am a vendor. So I didn't really understand the meaning of today because I don't speak English, I only speak Spanish. Uh, So he currently has all his permits up to date. He has the seller's permit. the county's permit. Also the taxes permit. However, when I come to the office, I have to ask for assistance in taking out the permit from City of Victorville. But at the city, they tell him that he has to have permission from a current commercial place where they're selling the same food as he is. So he sells fruit. So he sells fruit, so his requirements are take out a permit from a shopping center similar to what he's already selling, which would be like a supermarket or like a fruit business. Later. However, nobody in the area wants to give me this permission because I am considered a competition for them as well. So not even in gas station locations would they get allowed to get this permit or this yes for them to sell at their location. So he's wondering how can he go about this situation, or how can he address it if he already has his information in lines, but there's no yes to him to be able to get an actual spot for him to
I think I understand, but I'm a little bit tripped up just on the very end where there's like a competition thing. George, do you have any hint on what they might be talking about when it comes to the licensing and a competition thing that he mentioned?
It sounds like it's maybe operating on a private property, so that may be the requirement. I can certainly talk to this.
Yeah, it kind of sounded like it was a private property where there was a grocery store and they got upset. Is that what your take was on that?
There's some I'm not it's called Michoacana, the business in which they sell like shaved ice and like juices, like a juice bar. So they sell fruit. So then it's something related to his business because he has a fruit cart. So he can sell fruit if he was to get a permission from this business location because they sell something similar.
It sounds like he's trying to vend on that private property and those tenants might be mad at him.
Correct. Because what he was told from the city was he needs to work at an actual shopping center, and for him to work at the shopping center, he has to get someone similar to what he's vending. So that's why he's asking this business, but the business won't agree because it will be considered competition for them.
I'm not really sure because we're talking about street vending on the public right-of-ways primarily.
Right. So he'll stay on the outside edge of the sidewalk, but in order for him to be on that sidewalk, he would have to ask somebody within that shopping center as well as the person that something similar with.
Is that? I don't think that's the case. Would it be?
So good evening, again, Chair and Commission. I do believe, based on some of the comments, there is some confusion with the regulations of what happens on private property and what happens in the public street right of way, which is what we're talking about tonight. There are requirements to obtain a temporary use permit anytime you're vending on private property. And the commission may recall the additional allowances that we've allowed in Old Town to create, food truck hubs. So there is been action by the Planning Commission and City Council to make, food vending or any type of vending from private property more permissible. But this, it sounds like they may qualify if this ordinance that's before you passes. There will be additional areas on the sidewalk that they can vend from.
So, just to confirm, if he wasn't vending on the commercial property, but instead on one of these locations, he would be able to take out the permit on his own since he has all the other requirements already.
That's correct.
For example, Fifth Avenue, which is going to be right next to the Food for Less. But as long as he's out on the sidewalk and meets all the requirements, nobody should tell him that he shouldn't do it there.
Correct. He would not be required to obtain a property owner permission.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. So he's also mentioning that he has permission from other properties, so it won't necessarily have to be this one, like at a marketplace. Like he has a permission from a car lot where he can put his cart there and come and ask the city if that's approved. However, that's when the city tells him that he can't sell that because it's not exact.
Yeah, I think it's two separate issues that he's maybe talking about. Is one going on to private property, even if one person on that private property says, "Yeah, bring your cart on here, sell your stuff," but there are tenants in there selling the same thing, and they get upset, and then they say no. Primarily, what we're working on here is street vendors, sidewalk, out on the sidewalk, which the private businesses don't have jurisdiction over because the sidewalks are all of ours. That's public. The city staff controls the permits for that sidewalk, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, you need a special event permit or something to do a larger food truck in a parking lot for an event, right?
Correct. Any activity on private property would require that temporary use permit.
So he's looking for licensing on the streets, and we've come up with the list of streets. Any of these areas on the sidewalks, that's the permitting through the city staff.
I have a question, Scott. So then if he's getting permission from a business owner to sell on their lot and they're willing to give him permission and he comes to the city based off what we did on 7th Street, isn't that permissible even though it's not a grocery store?
So there are provisions throughout the city that it be a similar use to what's already permitted within the brick and mortar location. But it's not what's before you tonight. So if the commission wants to revisit that, we could bring that back at a later date.
Thank you.
Have any suggestions for where he can go? Maybe get a person that talks Spanish and can explain the situation a little bit better for him.
Yeah, which is the best department to come to for where you would start out for licensing?
The development department, anywhere on the first floor, we have bilingual employees that are willing to help.
Yeah, there's bilingual employees. It's in the main entrance, development department. A lot of counter space, easy to find.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comment. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to us on item number 4? Okay, seeing no one, I'll reclose the public hearing portion, and now I'll bring it back to the commission.
So I just want to add, personally, I think that an educational component should be added. I do agree that a majority of our vendors are Spanish speakers and they come from our Hispanic community. I know that sometimes they roam, but I also know that sometimes I know who's going to be where at Friday at 5 o'clock. And if we have identified areas, potentially there are already vendors there. And even if it's a flyer in English and Spanish that says the city's going to be doing this, after that, whether they do or don't go get their permit, that is no longer in our hands. However, I do believe there should be an educational component. We do have to comply with the law, and I understand that. And we're doing that as best as we can, but I do believe there needs to be an educational component to it. So that's all I have to say. I would like to see that added. But that's all I have.
We're ready for a motion then.
So I move to approve staff recommendations. How would I add that? If an educational component could be added to the provisions.
And just to clarify, that is for staff to provide some type of campaign or informational brochure.
Yes.
and reach out to the community.
Yes.
Or would that be, just for clarification, is that an outreach overall, or is that when people come in to the city to inquire or to try to figure out licensing, that they're given a packet and explained more? What I was just wondering what depth of that marketing. Yeah, I think that would make sense to have some at a minimum some kind of a handout for when there's involvement, when code enforcement ultimately makes contact with a vendor who's not licensed or not in a legal area, that they could be given information that helps explain the process and shows the area that has been decided that would be sufficient for that. Maybe something like that too. Okay. And so is that good enough on the motion?
Yeah, so my understanding, we won't we won't codify it, but it will be part of the recitals, which would then be conveyed to the city council for their consideration.
Okay.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Messin, a second by Commissioner Thomas. We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
No.
Commissioner Messin,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Chair Kurth.
Yes.
Motion passes with Commissioner Marsh voting no and Vice Chair Cook Askins being absent.
I want to thank all the staff, Mr. Duran, everybody for that, all the input onto this. That was a lot of work from you guys. Thank you for all the detailed information. And I was wondering if we could just, I would say maybe in 6 months or so, is there a way that the commission could get a follow-up on this item that could be, just an overview of how it's going with these changes, how it's going with the community outreach, the illegal ones that are out there now have a new area, and if we've managed to get any more people to license, like maybe a 6 month or whatever you think is appropriate. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Agenda item number 5 is case number PLAN 23-00025, an amendment to the Victorville Municipal Code with an environmental exemption, making various changes to Title 16 to address the recently adopted land use element of the general plan, including but not limited to new and updated development standards, implementation of new zone districts and overlay districts with an updated land use map, and other associated changes. As the Planning Commission may recall, this item is the culmination of work done to implement the zoning ordinance update as required by the adopted certified housing element and the land use element. Work completed thus far includes 2 Planning Commission workshops where updates to the residential, commercial, and industrial zone districts were reviewed. This included new and updated development standards, such as density updates and FAR, Florida area ratio requirements. It included new mixed-use zoning, which includes new development standards, land use allowances, and project review procedures and policies. This included our new MU1 and MU2 zoning districts that allowed both commercial and residential development, either a mixture or standalone. We also discussed new overlay districts, which include the new low-density residential infill overlay district and the health and wellness overlay district. These were introduced, including land use allowances, development standards, project review procedures, and policies. And lastly, we previously discussed off-street parking revisions for multifamily development to address parking requirements based on the number of bedrooms. The draft amendment before you tonight, as noted, is the final draft version that we've prepared for recommendation. While it includes those items that were previously presented and discussed during our workshops, this final version also includes updated non-conforming use and site standards, which clarify the 20-year enforcement requirement to clarify that is at the direction of the city council. The reason for this change was based on the historical implementation of this section of code. Historically, this hasn't been tracked, and there's a baseline for that. In approximately 2003, the city council directed the city to implement the non-conforming multifamily landscaping standards, and that was accompanied by an implementation enforcement schedule. So there's been no other instances where specific land uses we had that schedule. We also had input from the development community and business owners with regards to their concerns with existing land uses that may be considered non-conforming, and if that meant with the 20 years that we could decide to enforce it one day without any background or notification. So this change with non-conforming uses and site standards maintains the 20-year requirement, but it makes it at the direction of the city council to address a health and safety issue. We also introduced a new Greenway Utility Corridor zoning designation. This addresses those areas under the regional overhead transmission lines that traverse the city and address that allowable uses are related to utilities and recreational land uses. We updated the land use zoning map, which you see before you, and this coordinates with the adopted land use element of the general plan. 3 versions of this map were included in the staff report. They all include the same proposed zoning, but for clarification, the proposed and current zoning map highlighted only the changed areas. The proposed city zone changes map showed only the proposed zone change areas, so you could clarify where those were exactly that we're proposing to be changed. And the city zoning map shows all existing and proposed zoning on a single map. This would be, in effect, our new zoning map if recommended for adoption and ultimately adopted by the city council. Lastly, in this final version of the amendment, we've included and proposed a definition and land use allowances for what we're calling similar uses. This, as proposed, would replace the interim use permit process and request the revocation of Council Policy 11-05. This similar uses would allow the zoning administrator greater flexibility in allowing appropriate land uses at existing development when it's compatible with adjacent uses. Beyond our current enforcement of similar uses, which we don't typically currently define, this allowance would not only allow us to consider similar uses within a zone district, but also within buildings of other districts if that use is appropriate at that existing development site and wouldn't cause any adverse impacts. It does introduce a structure where the zoning administrator can determine if it's permitted or conditional. So we would retain a level of review of that moving forward, but it should open up existing buildings and areas that where development is, where maybe a use didn't exactly fit in the past, but now we could find a way to call it similar to that building and appropriate for that building and allow that use in that location. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive testimony regarding the proposed project, and take the following actions. Recommend that the City Council find the code amendment exempt pursuant to Section 15061B3 of the California Environmental Quality Act, and adopt resolution number P-23-028, recommending City Council approval of the Development Code Amendment, case number PLAN 23-00025. And staff remains available for any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Questions of staff? Okay. Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on agenda item number 5. Do we have any cards?
We do not.
No cards. And is there anyone here to speak to us on 5? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I'll bring this back to the Commission for determination.
I'll make a motion to adopt agenda item number 5 according to staff recommendations to include recommendations 1 and 2.
I'll second that.
I have a first by Commissioner Marsh, a second by Commissioner Messin. Take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh?
Yes.
Commissioner Messin? Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Chair Kurth?
Yes.
Motion passes with Vice Chair Cook Askins being absent.
Thank you. And that moves us on to our continued public hearing. That would be item number 6. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Agenda item number 6 is case number PLAN 22-00030. It is a continued public hearing for a site plan and conditional use permit with an environmental exemption to allow for the construction of a wireless communication facility stealthed as a palm tree, originally proposed at 74 feet in height, now reduced to 60 feet in height, at the rear of a developed property zoned C2 General Commercial located at 15350 Roy Rogers Drive. It is to be located on the site of an existing Winco Foods grocery market at the northern portion of the property behind the building. You may recall at the September 13th, 2023 hearing that the subject case was reviewed and continued to a future meeting based upon concerns with the height of the proposed facility. The proposal was originally presented with 2 options for approval. Option A, allowing the facility at a height of 42 feet, consistent with the antenna heights of other wireless facility co-locations in the immediate vicinity. And option B, allowing the facility at a height of 74 feet as requested by the applicant. During the public hearing, the applicant's representative and the Planning Commission discussed both options at length and continued the item to a later meeting in order to allow the applicant time to explore alternatives that would reduce the overall height of the facility and provide AT&T with adequate height to satisfy their service needs. Subsequent to the continuation of the item, the applicant and staff thoroughly discussed various height options and agreed that an overall height of 60 feet meets the coverage objectives of AT&T and is consistent with the heights of other recently approved standalone wireless facilities in this vicinity. The applicant has submitted revised plans and a variety of documentation that are attached to the staff report today, including items such as photo simulations of the proposed faux palm tree at 60 feet in height, and a radio frequency statement and propagation map to justify that at a height of 60 feet, the proposed wireless tower will close a significant coverage gap in an area roughly bordered by Tawny Ridge Lane to the north, La Paz Drive to the east, Seneca Road to the south, and Indian Wells Drive to the west. The center of the antennas will be 51 feet tall. The top of the antenna is at 55 feet, and the remaining 5 feet will be made up of faux palm branches, bringing the overall height to 60 feet. A height of 60 feet is in line with the height of existing wireless facilities in the general vicinity, including the wireless tower at nearby Brentwood Park, as well as recent approvals for standalone wireless facilities by the Planning Commission, including the 60-foot faux palm that was approved for AT&T on Outer Bear Valley Road last December. With that being said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing to seek testimony regarding the proposed project and take the following actions. 1. Find the project categorically exempt per CEQA section 15303 for new construction or conversion of small structures, and adopt resolution number P-23-014, adopting the conditional use permit portion of case number PLAN 22-00030, subject to the attached conditions of approval, and adopt resolution number P-23-015, approving the site plan portion of case number PLAN 22-00030, subject to the attached conditions of approval. Staff remains available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Oh, thanks. Then I'll go ahead and I will open up the public hearing. Applicant representative, if you'd like to come up.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize my horrible voice and coughing fit, but I first would like to thank Daisy and planning staff to help guide us through the process, and we work really close trying to have a compromise and lower the tree, and also give AT&T RF engineer what they wanted. And so I think we at this point have achieved that, and I'm here to answer if you have any other questions, and try my best.
Any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
And is there anyone here to speak to us on item number 6? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will bring this back to the commission.
I'll make a motion to adopt agenda item number 6 to include staff recommendations of 1, 2, and 3.
I second.
I have a first by Commissioner Marsh, a second by Commissioner Thomas. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Marsh,
Yes.
Commissioner Messin,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Chair Kurth.
Yes,
Motion passes with Vice Chair Cook Askins being absent.
that has passed. Thank you for being here. Sorry for the wait, and I'm glad it was a lot quicker than the last time we met. Okay, that's it for our items tonight. Any presentations from commission members, starting with Commissioner Thomas? Anything?
No, I just want to commend staff for working out that compromise because we were real far apart there with that height requirement. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Marsh?
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Messin?
I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and thank you all.
Yeah, and I agree the same thing. Thank you all. And it seems like just a few meetings ago, I always say the same thing. See you next year. It just goes that fast, you know. Happy New Year. And any staff comments?
I just want to echo your sentiments. Well,
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned. Have a great rest of your evening.